Hey y'all, it's Mr. Roman. See, I'm gonna start all the videos like that. I like that. I'm taking that from NPR Politics podcast. Well, anyway, hey y'all, it's Mr. Roman. This is China. We're gonna talk about the civil societies and the election system in China. It's gonna be short because there's not a lot of civil society going on in China. There's not a lot of political participation in China, and there sure as heck ain't a lot of elections in China. So here we go. This is an infamous picture of Tank Man. Tank Man, uh, what he did the day after Tiananmen Square massacre is he was going to work supposedly, had just had it, was fed up with what the authoritarian regime in China was doing and stood in the way of the tanks, and the tanks went around him instead of running him over. He then proceeded to climb onto the tank and beat the people in the tank with his bag of sorts that he is carrying. I'll show you the video in class. You can also look up the video of Tank Man on YouTube anywhere in the world except for China because Google has agreed that they will not um, allow that to be searched in China as a caveat for allowing to be a business that operates within China. So, yep, there you go. That's a little sense of what China lets you see. Political participation in China, like I said, not a whole bunch of NGOs or non-governmental organizations or interest groups, but there was actually none during Mao's regime. Uh, Mao's regime was about communism and the Communist Party and Maoism, so having any group that was outside of those ideological confines just wasn't okay. Private organizations have increased in recent years. A lot of the NGOs that are popping up now um, or non-governmental organizations deal with environment, health, providing charitable work, um, legal issues, things like that. And as long as they don't get involved with criticizing the government or the state's authority, they are pretty free to operate. So a lot of, like I said, the interest groups or non-governmental organizations aren't there to challenge the Chinese government. Rather, what they're there for is to focus on social issues. In 1990s, the NGOs could register with the government, and now you do have thousands of clubs that exist. I think it's cute that there's a lot of table tennis or ping pong clubs, so people can gather and socialize in that kind of sense. Again, this is, I know y'all are like, duh, why couldn't you have a ping pong club or some kind of sports organization? But this was not allowed under the Maoist regime. Also, you see a little bit of you see people connecting a little bit with their old religious ties. These are, religion was suppressed under communism, so you do see more churches like Christian churches and Buddhist coming out throughout society. But the government does keep close control and an eye on these groups like the Falun Gong, Falun Gong, either or. I've heard it pronounced both ways, and I will get into what that group is about in a second. But you will also find a description of what the Falun Gong is and their relationship with the Chinese government in the outline notes. Right. Protest. Okay, so there really has been very few mass demonstrations or uh, they got mass events or where a bunch of people will protest, mass protest, since Tiananmen Square in 1989. Again, I'm going to show y'all a little clip about Tiananmen Square in class. It's something that you can easily find on YouTube or Google. Most of the protests that you are going to find is at the village level, where the people who live in a village are going to call out local level communist officials or village level officials for being corrupt. Okay, I took a second because I wanted to edit what I had to say about the Falun Gong because I really didn't like how that was going. The Falun Gong is a religious group that has really large numbers. Their their roots can be traced back to Taoism, and actually before Mao had control with the Communist Party, the Falun Gong were considered an official religion. They weren't persecuted, but what they do is they get together large groups. They meditate and they exercise together. Um, and this is kind of intimidating to the Chinese Communist Party because of their just sheer numbers and the fact that they really don't rely on the Communist Party as much in their philosophy, but rather they rely on spirituality, which essentially undermines the ideas of communism. Um, so they do get persecuted in public. So like, here's a Time magazine of a Chinese official stepping on the face of one of the guys that were meditating. This is again a group of meditators that would be targeted by the Chinese communist police forces. You have labor unrest. Again, labor unrest is going to be more likely at the local level. And you do have protests in the autonomous regions where you're going to find more ethnic minority groups like the Tibetan Buddhist and the Uyghurs. So in Tibet, you have riots and demonstrations, especially that coincided with the 2008 Olympics. One of the problems people had with the Olympics in 2008 is that Beijing was spending a lot of money in the urban areas, or China was spending a lot of money in Beijing building up an infrastructure for the Olympics, and meanwhile ignoring the needs and the basic input of those living in the western regions of China. And also, having the Olympics in your country is an opportunity, if you're a Tibetan Buddhist, to have an international spotlight on how the Communist Party treats you differently and how you are not allowed to worship freely in your religion. The Uyghurs in the West also expressed dissatisfaction with the Chinese government over the handling of the deaths of two Uyghurs workers during a previous disruption. So labor unrest led to some protests and some strikes, and the Chinese government killed two Uyghurs. This is a picture of the demonstrations in 2009. You can see that this woman is wearing a headscarf, indicating that she'd be Muslim. This is a Buddhist monk protesting Chinese regime. Okay, Chinese elections. So I don't want y'all to overcomplicate this because it's not complicated, because the Chinese people really don't have any say at a nation or a national level. So there is no nationwide elections. There's only local elections for village committee members. And those village committee members win by first past the post majoritarian or majority elections. There are a lot of votes and there's high participation in voting in these elections. These elections started at the local level in the 1980s as part of Deng Xiaoping's reforms. Okay, so trying to make the country seem more democratic. So you pick these village committee members, and these village committee members go on to choose somebody at the county People's Congress, who then go choose the people who serve in the provincial People's Congress, who then choose the people that participate in the National People's Congress. And here, of course, I don't expect that anybody reads Chinese, but this is kind of a visual depiction of what happens. Now, I'm going to bust it down as if this was happening here in Isle of Wight County. So let's pretend that the village committee members would be you go in Smithfield and you vote for somebody who then goes on to Isle of Wight County. And then the Isle of Wight County Council members will then pick somebody to go represent the state of Virginia. So then the people in the state of Virginia will then go pick somebody who will go represent you in Washington, D.C. So this is a very indirect way of picking your national representatives. So what you're doing is you're picking people at the village level who will eventually pick people for the county level, who will then eventually pick people at the state level, who will then pick people at the national level. And of course, all of the people who are voted for or chose to sit on these councils or these committees are vetted, which means handpicked and checked out by the Communist Party of China or the Chinese Communist Party, and anyone over 18 can vote. So that is Chinese elections in a nutshell. So you're only directly electing people at the village level. That is a wrap for Chinese elections. And no, I'm not going to rap because I have no rap skills. All right. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day, evening, or morning.